Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rami Shami, and if it's morning in your area, such as Alberta, well then, good morning. Um, Today we're gonna engage in a workshop in a self-care practice in a traditional ancestral aspect of a somewhat of a healing practice, but more in my mind, a self-awareness, self-introspection practice. My name is Rami Shami, and I am a case manager with Kensington Health. We have this collaborative effort to support caregivers for someone who is caring for someone who has cancer. And between Kensington and Wellspring, we provide these webinars that are recorded. So if you have to leave today or it's on short notice, they'll be on their website. The workshop that I'm going to work with today, this is not really meant to teach you how to do it. It's to give you an idea of how we can use other mediums, other creative mediums, whether they're music, art, spoken word, narrative, or the tangibility of a hard medium with which we can express our caregiving struggles, express even the trauma and traumatization of being a caregiver and providing caregiving, and also self-reflect on it and have a deeper insight into how we provide caregiving, how it affects us, how it may traumatize us, how it may cause us grief and anticipatory loss, and how it actually can be navigated with a deeper sense of introspection. It's kind of like, how do we do things? How do we feel about them? How do we move through them? And I think when we use a tangible medium, it kind of pulls it out of our heads and heart and puts it right in front of us. And then the self-reflection is sometimes a bit better facilitated or more easily facilitated. This particular practice we're going to talk about today, it's called kintsugi. K-I-N, sugi. Kin is Japanese for golden. Sugi is Japanese for repair. The idea behind this ancient Japanese practice is the fact that, or the philosophy that which is broken can, with an intentionality, be brought back together in whatever way and however way we would like to do that or feel compelled to do that on our own timeline, in our own way. And that can be representative of a moving forward in a grief, in a traumatization, in our experiences of caregiving. And then when we put these pieces back together, or if we leave some pieces out, or where the pieces don't fit in this brokenness of whatever has been changed, we highlight those cracks. We highlight those, what we call precious scars. We highlight those changes that have happened to our life, to ourselves, to who and what we are, with gold. And the idea behind the gold, which is this kind of paint, is not necessarily to beautify something. That's actually misrepresentation of what kintsugi is. The philosophy actually behind the gold isn't in beautification of scars or in trauma or in loss or in caregiver challenges. It simply is to bring a sharper awareness to ourselves, what is happening in our lives, what's happening within our caregiving. We look at it and we can see it just a little bit better. It's a self-awareness piece. Oh, there's my cracks. There's the trauma that I've experienced. There's my caregiving struggles. There's the way I navigate the world. There's my grief. We can see it. And if we're so autonomous and self-directed, then we can actually show it to others. That this is what's happening to me. This is what my life represents. And the bowl ends up serving as a medium with which we express our challenges and express our lives and express our experiences. So today we're going to start. You can see I've laid out all my materials. Don't need to go through them because they're just for the application of the workshop. And we're going to start off with a bowl. It's a regular bowl. It's kind of pretty, you know. This actually kind of represents my life, right? Not this in terms of the design or what have you, but the wholeness of the bowl. How often do we think that our bowl may not be whole, may not be, put together, may not have chips and cracks in it, right? And that's the metaphor behind what we would assume is a pre-diagnosis of our lives. You know, it's put together a little bit differently or a lot differently in comparison to what happens when someone we care for has a diagnosis of cancer and then we begin caregiving for them. I can't tell you how often, I can't tell you how often I've heard from people say, and it makes a lot of sense. My life has never been the same since the diagnosis. And I'm not the one being diagnosed. It's my husband, my wife, my partner, my friend, my family member, my son, my daughter, my child. And ever since then, the bowl has never looked the same. So this bowl is going to signify pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis. Okay. The challenges of being a caregiver or providing caregiving. But I caution you in one thing, that technically our bowls are not like this: clean, whole, pristine, unbroken, unchipped, uncracked before someone that we care about has a diagnosis. Many a times we come into a diagnosis and caregiving for somebody who has cancer with our bowls already broken from life, our own traumatizations, our own anxieties, our own depression, our own suicidality, our own divorces, our own losses, our own experiences. But for clarity's sake, we're gonna assume that this represents an aspect of our life that's going to change when we become and continue to provide caregiving. So, as such, I'd like to take a moment and just bring us to a sense of grounding. So, can I ask you all just to sit comfortably? Have your hands beside you in your lap in whatever position feels comfortable. If you're a practicer of mindfulness and meditation, you could have your hands in the traditional, Buddhist practice of how the hands are held, one cradling the other and the thumbs together, but you don't have to. Just take a couple of deep breaths, feet firmly planted on the ground. Just feel yourself to come to a sense of presence. Let's take a couple of deep breaths. And I ask you just to focus on the sound of my singing bowl. I hope that you can hear the vibration, but just focus just for 30 seconds on its resounding sound. All right. With our busy lives and COVID and our caregiving challenges and struggles and what have you, let's just be here and now for me and for you. I caregive for two older adults, which are my parents. Both are not well. My mom has a tumor in her neck, and I have a 9-year-old child. So it's busy. As I can imagine, most of you have busy lives. So with respect to the bowl, what I'm going to do is take it and turn it upside down. And I'm going to put a towel underneath it. I'm going to put a towel above it. And there is symbolism behind that. Do you see how instinctively, intuitively, my hands went to cradle the bowl? I don't know why I did that, but it's almost as if I'm giving it care. I don't know. I didn't intentionally do that because I know something's going to happen to it. And many times when the person we're caring for receives a diagnosis, it's sudden. We don't know. We don't know that was going to happen to them, but I know something's going to happen to this bowl. But it's also symbolic and metaphoric that my life is going to change forever. This bowl is going to change forever. Once I covered it, it will never look the same. And right now, what I want to do, I'm anxious just to take one last look at it, but I can't. I've already received the diagnosis. This diagnosis has already been received. And so it's going to change. My life is going to change. My bowl is going to change. And with that, I'm just going to take a moment, and each part of this healing practice involves an aspect of mindfulness and reflection. I'm just going to take a moment and see a pause and think, what does that feel like? The rest of my life is going to change. This is never going to be the same. Do we take pause in our lives when we're caregiving? Do we take pause at the time of diagnosis to self-reflect of what's happened? Do we just have a moment? Like that was literally 30 seconds. I'm not always a proponent that we don't have time. We have 30 seconds. We have 1 minute in time, logistically, but can we make it? Can we focus on it? Can we be present with it? So I just want to be present with it just for a moment. And right away, I have feelings of anxiousness. I have feelings of grief. I'm anticipating a loss somewhere in my life as a caregiver or potential caregiver. My life is never going to be the same. Now, recognizing that, I know I'm going to break this bowl. It's a pretty bowl. It's a nice bowl. It's an expensive bowl. And those feelings, I honor them and I'm aware of them. Because what happened to those feelings, if I'm not processing and acknowledging those feelings, they almost complicate and infuse themselves into my caregiving role. And then they complicate the picture for me that I don't know where I stop and my caregiving and who I'm caregiving before begins. And sometimes they interface. And sometimes I can take my experiences of anticipatory loss and grief and anxiousness and project it onto the caregiving and onto the person I'm caring for. And I'm a very strong proponent that we focus on ourselves as caregivers. However, it's in that self-awareness, self-introspection type of focus. And it's in that sharing that we have in our group, our Caregiver Connects group that we have once a week, that we bring those experiences. Now I'm going to don a protective measure. Usually I have goggles, but to be completely transparent, I forgot my goggles at home. So I'm going to wear the mask I wear when I serve at the hospice residence next door when I go see residents. That is for COVID, although this one's been sanitized. I'm going to wear it because I'm about to break a bowl. And the bowl is going to be broken with these small, maybe you can see, these small mini hammers. These hammers you can buy at Home Depot, and they're a hand hammer. And the reason why I want a hand hammer is because it transmits the emotion that I am carrying through the hand to the hammer the most direct. So again, I return to my bowl and I am thinking to myself and I'm feeling the anxiousness of a change, of a loss, of an irreversible change that's going to happen. And as I feel that, I feel the power building up in my hand. And it's time to change or address and acknowledge the change in my life. There you have it. Our lives have been changed. The bowl has changed. Oftentimes when we're caregiving for somebody who has living with cancer, who has cancer, it feels like our lives have fragmented apart. And yet the symbolism behind the towel remaining on the pieces before I've even looked at them is that it's reflective in, I don't know what's going to happen over the next few months or few years. I hear that in caregiver groups all the time. What's going to happen? We don't know. The unknown. I think, Simon, you remember the last group we talked about this aspect of, I don't know what's going to happen. That's very similar to keeping the towel on the bowl. I don't know what those pieces are going to look like. I don't know how badly broken it is. I don't know if I could put it back together. But let's take a look. Okay. And once again, I take pause. I take pause in this first experience of how the bowl has changed. And I think to myself, or I'm mindful of what I'm thinking to myself is that, what am I going to do now? What part am I going to tackle first? What aspect of caregiving am I going to adopt first? And sometimes our, how can I say, our instinct is to dive in there and fix everything right away, to start moving, start fixing things. I got to put this back together. I can't leave it like this. It's too many pieces and it's making me anxious that the pieces are separated. But let's just take a moment and pause and look at what's changed, what's happened. So I look and I see the pieces have changed. I see small pieces. I see big pieces. I see a really big piece. I think, okay, maybe I could tackle that first. That might be the easiest part of this journey through caregiving that I can tackle. Smaller pieces, no, they make me anxious. What am I going to do? Do I want them? And sometimes I reflect on myself that those are aspects of my life that maybe I don't want in my life anymore as a caregiver. Maybe they're just burdens. Maybe they're people that no longer understand or even can resonate with what I'm going through and what I'm experiencing. So I got to think and just take pause to allow myself time to think. And literally, it's only 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes just to be present. Say, where do I start? So the next part of the practice is actually to be mindful and careful that the pieces can cut you. And I love how metaphoric that is, because certain aspects of our caregiving can hurt us and often do hurt us and do cut us and do cause us to bleed. So I'm going to be a little bit careful of how I step into this and not rush in to try to change, alleviate, or move away from what I'm experiencing. So I'm going to start picking up the pieces and looking at them and just being present with them, because these are the pieces of my life that have changed since I've become a caregiver. And I give each one due attention and I put it aside. It's another piece. What does it mean to have these pieces? These are aspects of my life. They could be friends, family, job, marriage, partners, activities. Some of them are symbolic of activities that I'll never do again or I won't do again for a long time because of my caregiving duties. I'll miss them. I start to grieve them just looking at them. And I wonder, will they ever return to my life? Will they be, you can see there's shards here. I think they call them shards. And I look around and say, are those shards people? Are those shards aspects of my personality or faith or spirituality? Do I want them? Do I not want them? Do I want to keep them as part of my journey? I'm not sure. In caregiving, we oftentimes have this tendency to maybe catalyze change and healing and coming back together or push the envelope. But I like just to take pause and see even if those things are still important in my life. Like, is this piece still important? Is this piece still important? Do I really want these? How is this piece going to fit back in my life? So metaphorically speaking, you can see that this journey is about just holding presence and holding space for what's happened, and not to rush or even to just to recognize the sensation and the feeling and the instinct of rushing to overcome that which has changed, to take away the uncomfortableness. So I'm just taking a look of what I have left with each of the pieces. And once I feel ready, once I'm either I feel ready or maybe the situation demands it. I mean, sometimes we have no choice but to step into it and start the journey and start problem solving and start caring and start providing what we're asked to provide or needed to provide. So I'm going to look and I'm going to think, you know what? I'm going to start with this biggest piece. Whatever that means, that for me looks like the most manageable. Okay. Sometimes I'll break a bowl and I'll look at, now today, I feel ready to tackle something even more challenging and more difficult. Each day is different. Each moment is different. So I'm going to take a moment and see what piece would work well with this big piece. Where does it fit? I found it. I'm going to open the glue. And I'm going to apply some glue to both sides because caregiving isn't always unidirectional. We caregive for others, and we have to find somehow some aspect of caregiving for ourselves. You can see I'm putting glue on both sides. The other thing I'm going to do is make space. I'm going to make space within my heart, my mind, my actual area, so that I can actually get the work done. I set the scene. And think to yourselves, what does that mean for you? What does it mean to create space if you can create space? And it doesn't necessarily have to be logistic space, but space in your heart and mind to acknowledge and reflect on how something feels when it happens. So right away, I'm recognizing as I put this bowl back together, it's not going to fit the way it once did. It's forever changed. But what I like to do is put the piece on and let go. Oftentimes when I run these workshops, I see us pushing the pieces really tight together because we're anxious or we're nervous or we're afraid the pieces won't fit. You know what happens when we push the pieces really hard together? The glue separates. It stops taking hold. It runs away. Sometimes it's a gentle fingertips approach to just set something and leave it. And for the interest of the timing of this workshop, you know, I'm going to put this bowl back together before your eyes, but in true healing fashion, in true journeying through caregiving fashion, sometimes the healing takes weeks or months or years. So you put a piece, and it actually in ancient Japanese practice of the kintsugi bowl, sometimes you put a piece and you leave it for a few days. Just let it sit and be. Think about how metaphoric or reflective that is on your life, just to set it and leave it. So what I'm conscious of is if I have any need, just to sit there and sometimes even hold it up so that nobody comes near it, to protect it with all my might so nothing happens to it because it's been wounded, it's been damaged, it's been hurt, it's been broken. Right? But sometimes that's counterproductive. That's counterproductive to the healing. Simon asks, do you give the chunks an identity? Do you identify what portion of your life it represents? It all depends, Simon. I personally do. Yeah. And I've seen many people do. I'll say that's my brother who's been gone for a long time in terms of his caregiving. He left it all with me. That's my mom. You know, this is my dad because I carry the load for the family for many years now. This is my daughter. She's the smallest piece and I want to give her more attention. And this is my friends. Okay. And these, well asked. I appreciate your question. And these are my activities. Look how small they got. Okay. And so the shards in there are aspects of my life that I can no longer have time to sit there and pick through them and give them attention and time. So you can, Simon. And for me, I do. Absolutely. And sometimes folks, when you break a bowl, it can be some aspect of your life that you're meditating on or reflecting on. It can be work, it can be your marriage, or it can be your partnership. It can be you, how you feel about yourselves. When I meditated on this bowl, it really was about my mom and dad, who I saw last night, who just looked really tired, like they're just done with life, you know, and my heart goes out to them because I have my life that I'm trying to live and I'm busy with work and, you know, things I want to do, my daughter and my activities, but the biggest piece there is my caregiving, right? You can see it. It's the whole part of it. And I'm not surprised it broke like that because that is, you know, I find, I don't want to get too esoteric and hairy-fairy and what have you, but I find the energy that we're carrying inside of us almost transmits to the bowl. And either we subconsciously project it on the bowl and then see what we want to see, but I've seen it too often that it actually manifests. I don't know how, magically, energetically, whatever you want to define. So this big piece here, to me, Simon, represents my caregiving. As I meditated on the caregiving of my mother and father. And each other piece has its representation. So good question. So I'm going to check and see. See, I caregive from afar. I visit them. There's COVID, they're older adults. I'm vaccinated, but I'm still very careful. So I have to caregive and then let go. Caregive and let go. There's this oscillation to go in and out, okay, which is hard, of course. No easier or harder than living with somebody you're caregiving for. So let's try another piece. I think I'm ready. See what other piece will fit here. But you see, as I try to put that other piece on, I'm afraid this one's going to break. Now you think about that in caregiving. You think about that in supporting somebody living with cancer. You think about that in your grief after that person may have died, trying to get your life back together, trying to feel some kind of joy in putting your pieces of your life back together. So I'm afraid now. I don't want to touch this while I put this piece on, but I have to touch it. I have to do something with it because otherwise it's not going to work, at least in my mind. That doesn't feel like it belongs there. Maybe it belongs on the other side. Nope. And as we try to piece sometimes our lives back together, there's almost a trial and error. What fits, what doesn't fit, what friendships work now, what relationships work, what don't, what job works, what doesn't, what do I want, what can I do? All right, I found a piece that actually fits. All right, it took me a few months to recognize that this piece doesn't belong where I was trying to fit it. So I'm not going to force it. Sometimes we try to force things in the anxiousness of leaving them undone or unhealed. Although I don't think healing has a timeline. I think healing is a lifelong journey. So again, my support, which is the glue that's been there for so long for me, has run out. That's my support. What am I going to do now? So I'll have to find other supports. And you see how the metaphor can play to every aspect of this healing journey. So I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try a different friend. I'm going to try a different job. I'm going to try a different chemotherapy, a different support. I'm going to try a different group. And for a while, it's hard for it to come out. Maybe it's not the right glue. Maybe it's not the right situation. Maybe it's not the right person to help me. Let's try the other side. I'm anxious now. I'm wondering, is this going to come together? Is it going to hold? Is it going to survive? Is it going to have meaning? And it fits, but it's messy. It's messy. Once I get a chance, I'll turn it around. It's messy. There's glue everywhere. Caregiving can be very messy. And I don't mean necessarily practically messy, but mentally, emotionally can be messy. But it's coming back together. All right, I'm okay with it. It doesn't look like the way it used to. Now I'm thinking to myself, what do I do? What am I feeling? Should I continue? Should I try another piece? Am I ready for that? Am I ready to think about finding a new home, even though the person I'm caring for and that I love is still alive? Am I thinking ahead of her or him or they? Do I feel guilty about that? Should I try another piece? Should I stay with the bowl as is? Should I just stop now? You know what? That's good enough. I have 3 pieces in place. That's my daughter. That's I don't know what that was. I can't remember what that was. Interestingly, in caregiving, sometimes we even lose focus and sight of what is important to us. So I don't know. I'll give it a new identity. Maybe that's my work. Maybe I'm okay with the bowl just staying like this, gaping. At least it has some support. At least it's sitting up and it has a bit of a backbone. Maybe I could just leave it like this for a while or forever. Does it have to come all back together? Maybe I don't even feel like it'll ever come back together. So it could be a few moments, a few days, a few months, a few years. And sit with those pieces. Try not to rush them. You know what? I'm going to try again. I'm going to use a support. I'm going to put that support on. Put enough on that it helps, but I don't want to take too much advantage of it because it will make it really messy, or it might go away and not help me anymore. Might not listen to me anymore. Might not want to hear my story anymore. But I don't want to put too little on it because otherwise It might not hold. And I realized maybe I need even more than I thought. So here I go. I'm putting the piece in, recognizing that I need even more help on the other side. Otherwise, it's not going to stick. And I put it in gently, and I watch to see how much patience I have with it. And I see it's not fitting completely as I want it to. And how does that make me feel? Oh, the other side has moved now. So in trying to help one aspect of my life, it kind of destabilized another aspect. So that means in many ways, we can't just look at our lives in parts, I don't think, without recognize that one part by a ripple will affect a very distant part, almost like 6 degrees of separation. So as I working with one part, whether you perceive it as healing, negotiation, self-care, whatever it may be, I looked at the other parts. I'm like, okay, how are they adjusting? Well, they all moved like tectonic plates on the earth. They all moved. And so I have to go over to another part of my life and work there and work on another part of my life because I put this piece back in place. For example, a caregiver that goes back to work. Ooh, that's less time with the person I'm caring for. That affects my activities. That affects my time. One piece affects every other piece. But it's working. I'm all right with it right now. Still feeling anxious and still fiddling. I've watched some people that don't fiddle. They just put it back together and that's it. Just leave it. Right? And so I look at it and say, okay, it's been 6 months. Do I really want to bring this piece back in? It's going to change everything. It's going to move everything. But I'm going to do it. I've taken some time on it. I've reflected. I see how I feel about it. I'm scared. I'm anxious. And I'm excited to see a different wholeness in my life. The chemo's working. I have a client right now where his wife is having her last treatment today. And so let's see how it works. Does it go in? You see, it's awkward. It's not fitting right. It's because it had the last chemo treatment today. Doesn't mean things are going to be smooth. Maybe I got to take it out and try again. All right, there we go. It's fitting. And again, it's affected every other aspect of the bowl, everywhere else. Here we go. And it's not straight. You see that? Can you see that? It's not aligned. And if I start fiddling with it, it starts to affect the other parts. But what part of me wants it to look like it used to look, knowing that it's never going to look like that again? Our lives are never going to be the same again. And am I trying to get there? Can I be present with how it is now? Can I let it sit? Because I know these changes are going to be semi-permanent unless I want to break the bowl again. But here we go. And I'm very mindful and I pay attention to, how can I say, the care that I do this with, because it's reflective in my mind, unconsciously really, of the care and caregiving that I provide. I try to use a gentle approach. I recognize my frustrations and my anger. I recognize my bias. I recognize some of my perfectionism, my intolerance. I recognize how some of my experiences of trauma start to be triggered. You can see me fiddling, playing, moving. One of the greatest gifts of the kintsugi bowl is the self-reflective practice of our inner nature. How do we move through things? Like for all intents and purposes, this is just a bowl from Sonoma. But how I move through it and how I care for it and how I touch it and how I piece it back together and how I feel about it is really reflective of how I feel when I caregive for others. Whether I like it or not, I can't stop it. I mean, I could fake it for you, but if I'm authentic with myself, this is how I am. And when you break a bowl or you engage in such a practice, see, I got pricked. See that? And that is caregiving. I was given such care. Why? Why the fuck did that happen? Why did I get pricked if I'm being so kind and so caring and so compassionate? And then they swore at me, or they got mad, or they got angry, or I hurt myself. That's what that means to me. Every aspect of this process, this journey, has meaning if you choose to receive it as such. That hurt. That hurt. That hurt emotionally. And that hurt practically. It actually stung in my finger. And it surprised me because I didn't see it coming. How often in caregiving do we not see something hurtful, painful, wounding, traumatizing affect us? We don't often see it coming. Sometimes we do, but we don't. And so what do? Now I'm apprehensive. I've been stung. I've been providing such care, and I'm touching it differently now. I don't know if I have any more trust in it. So maybe the person recognizes that who we're caring for, that we're not as engaged as we once were. You see, I'm not holding it like I once was because I'm afraid of getting poked again. So it's going to take some time for me to build some trust. And so now I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to take a chance. It's starting to separate in certain spots. Maybe I just need to hold it and be with it and honor it. And as I look at it, I'm like, my, what happened to my life? It was so different. But I keep playing with it and keep fiddling with it. And sometimes I just got to let it go and sit there and take a shape of its own. But I'm going to take a chance. I want to see what it's like on the other side. I want to get a different perspective. I want to see if I can fit some of these pieces in. See these last pieces? They're important to me. These are kind of important to me, but these are important to me. So that takes a bit of almost like a risk for me to take the bowl, lift it, and turn it. All right. Wow, it held together. Maybe it's the love and energy and compassion of you all. I was expecting it to fall apart, and it might fall apart. I've repaired bowls, healed bowls, brought bowls back together, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, hey, look what I did. And it falls apart. How often in our lives do we feel like we got it back together or got pieces of it back together only to see it come undone? That's a lesson of the kintsugi bowl as well. So what do we do in those moments when things unravel or one of these pieces falls out or it starts to separate? See how it's starting to separate? Look, that piece wants to leave. Oh, there it goes. Boom. So this is an important experience. I just worked so hard to put this bowl back together. You saw me, you bared witness, and it fell apart. What do I do now? Do I step back in and help? There's been a recurrence of the cancer, or the person who I'm caring for doesn't acknowledge or recognize the care I'm providing, or I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm hurt, and the bowl fell apart. What do I do? Do I just leave it and sit with it? For me, I'd sit and go, okay, what's this like for me? What's this experience like for me? You know, and when do I want to step back into it? And for me, I want to step back into it. So we start again. Let's take a look. It wasn't ready. I pushed too hard. I rushed. Or I didn't put enough glue. And so I'm going to try again. Maybe this time I should wait. I feel good about the first piece. Isn't that life? Isn't that what we go through, these trials and tribulations of our bowls breaking and coming back together and breaking again, despite all our efforts? And caregiving can be traumatizing. It's like a trauma, right? Because here I am, I'm anxious because it broke apart. And I'm like, what if I do this all over again? I do it all over again. And then it falls apart again. What do I do then? Do I keep trying? Do I give up? And so what I do is not necessarily force the bowl to come back together. I'm just being very aware of what are my natural tendencies when things don't go the way I wanted them or the way I planned them. That's the reflective practice. You see, this bowl is going to take some time till it actually repairs itself, or that I find repair for it. And as I navigate it, as I support it, as I try again, I just watch not so much of the mistakes I made before, but how I'm feeling about the possibility of it not coming back together like it once was. And this time, I feel it needs time to sit. It needs time just to be there. It needs time for me to let go and let the earth, let gravity just support it. So I'm going to leave that. Now I'm going to move to the second part of this. Okay. Which is, depending how the bowl has come back together, and depending how the pieces fit, you can see in this particular bowl, some of the pieces don't necessarily fit properly. This is a bowl that I repaired, and you can see there's still some cracks. And I'm just mindful of what are those cracks being, what do they feel like? You can also see that I've started to paint the cracks in gold. And what I like to do is paint all the cracks in gold. I want, as part of my inner nature and my curiosity and self-curiosity, I want the gold to highlight all my cracks. I don't want, as much as possible, any areas of shadows or darkness that I'm not aware of. And that's part of my personality. Although I've seen people put their bowls in a way that some of the pieces are missing, and they only paint the gold inside and they don't show you the outside because they say, no, that's none of your business. I'll show you if I want to show you where my cracks are, but that's just for me. Okay. So that will depend on who and what you are. And I find in with kintsugi, it's just to allow yourself to naturally navigate the journey of the bowl, to let yourself be expressed through the medium, and then watch it. It's like a third party sitting there watching how you navigate experiences, especially of caregiving. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply the gold cern. It's like a paste and a paint at the same time. And if you see, I start to be mindful of my nervousness, of what it feels like just to go over every piece, every area, every crack. And as I do it, the reflective practice, if I take my time, is that I become acutely aware of what those experiences mean to me. Just by, when you focus on doing something, your mind becomes somewhat focused. It opens up our hearts to almost navigate and become aware of that which we're doing. So the focus allows me to feel and think about, oh, I remember this part. Yeah, I remember this part. Oh, that's what I was thinking about it. That's what it meant to be. I break a bowl for most of my life occasions. I break a bowl and put my energy into it. And then as I'm working with it, it helps me process and process the experience and be mindful of what arises, the feelings, the thoughts, the sensations, the somaticizations of the experience. So I'm just paying attention to what's arising within me while I focus on each and every of these parts as I try to paint the lines in gold. And you'll see a little bit more. Sometimes there's just a crack. I highlight it. And sometimes there's gaping cracks like this, right? What I do with those is actually I go around them to highlight that there's a chasm in there. That's never come together. That's like the separation between me and a friend. We're there, we're in the vicinity, but because of my caregiving responsibilities and duties, we've never really come back together the way we were. There's always that gap in space. We never talk about it. That's what that reminds me of. What I'm also mindful of is how fast I move the gold. Am I in a hurry? Am I in a rush? Or do I really take my time? Oh, I can actually see that piece? Wow, that piece is movable. It's stuck on one side and movable on the other. That came out of nowhere. How is it sometimes in our caregiving roles in our lives, we recognize that what we thought was back in place and sturdy, look at that. Feel that? It moves. So I have to be careful with that. I don't know if I want to put more glue on it, I want to work at it, or just leave it for the rest of my life. Maybe it's, in my mind, too much trouble. Or maybe I'm scared and apprehensive about working it. Or maybe I think it's cool to have a moving part that if I want to in the future, I could take it out. And I wonder sometimes how much of the gold do I want to put on each crack? What happens when my hand shakes and it isn't perfect? Do I want to grab the water and the brush, dip it in there, and go in there and fix it? Do I want to wait till the end, or do I just keep going and say, it's okay, life isn't perfect? Those are all practices that we reflect on. And there's some big cracks in here. Do I start from the inside and start working internally? Or do I start working from the outside and start painting the lines here from the outside in? And what happens if I start painting from the outside in? And then how do I hold the bowl? To me, reflectively, that looks at me as if I start working on my image, my outward appearance, the optics of me in the public eye, and the work and I do, or my interactions and engagements with work colleagues and friends. And if I haven't worked on the inside, am I being honest and authentic with myself? Right? Or is this the caregiving role that I'm supposed to be focused on? Is this the people that I'm supposed to be focused on? And that's all that really matters right now. If I start working on the outside, maybe I'm being distracted or not invested or involved. So many different ways you can look at this. So many different ways with which this can be representative to you. I like to take my time and just look and see what's different, what's changed, what's happening to me within me as I decorate this bowl. Decorate. As I color, as I bring to awareness. And as I continue and take the time and energy with which to highlight the cracks and breaks and scars and wounds and story of my life, it can turn out like this. See, this bowl was broken, and I took my time over a while to put it back in a way that I found resonated with me. You can see how much of it internally it's changed, eh? See that? There's some pieces that I never found, that'll never come back. They've been lost forever. And I grieve those pieces, metaphorically. And here, take a look. You know what this means to me? There was a potential for a full break, but it didn't full break, it just cracked. It didn't separate completely. So something stayed in my life in the vicinity, but didn't completely leave, but didn't completely stay. And then there's these chips, little, to me, annoying chips that just chipped at my self-worth and my self-esteem and said, hey, we're just going to chip your confidence a little bit, and you're never going to see us again. There's one here that just left the minutest of marks, like a paper clip. It bugs me. It bugs me because the whole bowl is still blue except for that particular mark and the pieces in the middle. Then I look and I flip it. I'm like, you know what? It's workable. I can carry this forth. But I'm bothered because its identity has changed. Do you notice the name is no longer scripted? This piece is missing. And for me, that signifies even sometimes a change in who and what we are, a change in our identity of who and what we are as caregivers. But for the rest of my life, this is the bowl I live with. This is the bowl I interact with all of you with. This is the bowl that I look at myself and say, that's my life right here, right now. This is the bowl that I continue to caregive with. And I think one of the most powerful lessons of the kintsugi bowl is that this is the bowl that can be broken again. So even though I've repaired it in some way, healed it in some way, honored it, we're self-reflected on it, at any moment in our lives, especially as we've experienced with the people that we're caregiving for, another hammer could come and break it. Now, I'm not going to do that because for me, that's traumatizing. It's enough to recognize and become aware of the possibility of change. And really, that's the lesson in a lot of the caregiving aspects we have. The impermanence of things, the changeability of things, how sometimes we have to take time and recognize what's happening to us, to pause, to share it. Like I would love to tell you what this bowl meant to me, but it's very personal. Why the pieces are missing, why I decided not to put some pieces back in place, why that chip bothers me, what it means to not have the name William Sonoma back in what it should be in my mind. The kintsugi bowl really truly is a form of a self-reflective practice. I think it works really well, folks, because of the tangible medium being able to touch on the creative aspects of our mind. And those creative aspects sometimes have access to our unconscious or our semi-subconscious, where many a times our experiences, our true feelings, our honest vulnerability lives and is harbored. And when we have a safe medium with which we can externalize it, it's almost as if the heart and mind say, it's okay if I put it in the bowl, because the bowl is not me. I'm me. But if I put it in the bowl, it's not really me. It's a tangible medium. But in reflection, it can be a projection, if not a reflection of who and what we are. Yes, Simon, this is pretty good glue. It is E6000. That's quite the odor. Anyways, folks, that is the kintsugi bowl. If you have any questions, feel free to put them up in the panel. I wanted to share that with you just to give you an idea that there is opportunities within other mediums that we can express and share. It's not always talk. It can be other aspects that talk for us and talk to us. And besides the Caregiver Connect group, I've never met a medium that talks to me as well as the kintsugi bowl. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, any thoughts, put them in the chat. Otherwise, we will close this session in a couple of minutes. Thank you, Simon.